Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. So happy to be back here on a Monday. Thanks for being here with us. Well, you know, it could be a Tuesday morning where you are if you're listening on the other side of the date line. But whatever it is, we're awful happy you're here because we love being here. And we've got a very, very good show for you. Second hour, we'll do Ask a Priest. And this hour, we'll do some faith and science. We've got Dr. Stacy Trasancos with us, scientist and theologian, and soon to be scientist, theologian, and philosopher. She's the author of Particles of Faith, a wonderful speaker, and if she talks wherever you are, she's going to talk about atoms. I can promise you that. Dr. Stacy Trasancos, thanks for being here.
Hi, Cy. Thank y'all for having me back.
You're a scientist and theologian and about to be a philosopher as well.
A wannabe philosopher.
You're a wannabe philosopher?
A wannabe philosopher. I studied chemistry because when I started out with biology and I realized I'm not going to understand biology unless I understand what the atoms are doing underneath it all. And it's the same way with philosophy. I studied theology back in 2010 to 2014, and I just never could quite grasp that stuff in the middle, the philosophy. So I thought, well, I'm getting older. It's something I told my husband I wanted to do when I had the chance, when the kids got older and I could. So I'm filling in the gaps now with philosophy. It's kind of like the chemistry of science. It's getting underneath everything and explaining why the church came to those conclusions about doctrines like the Trinity and the Incarnation and the human person. It's really cool because when you hear something that Aristotle said, you're like, wait, Aquinas said that. Now I know where he got it. Now I know why the church teaches this. We owe a lot to Aristotle. I never realized that before.
Oh, we do indeed. He was so important for Aquinas. Aquinas didn't even call him Aristotle. He just called him the philosopher, which is not as good as scientist and theologian, but it's good. The number here is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And as you know, when Dr. Stacy Trasancos is here, we're going to talk about faith and science. If you have a faith and science question, whether you are a person of faith or not a person of faith, if you have a question about faith and science, you're very welcome here, 888-318-7884. Also, I really want to stress this, whether you're old or young. And I say that in particular to invite the young because a lot of times, I think young people feel a kind of conflict between faith and science. They're not sure. They may feel that they need to choose between the two. And here we have a PhD in chemistry who's also a theologian and says, no, you don't have to choose between the two. 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Let me just ask you about it because we were talking a little bit before the show and you were saying, you've been getting more and more people asking you about intelligent design, which is, well, maybe you could just tell us what the intelligent design movement is and what the kind of questions are that you've been getting.
Yes, I butt heads anytime it comes up with intelligent design, but it's not in the way that people think. My message to the intelligent design community has always been, you need to go bigger. I get the impression that they like I was saying before with biology, they stop with biology and they're looking for intelligent design here and there, you know, the irreducible complexity and the language and the DNA, which is all, I agree with all that. I agree that everything we know in science is it's like the tip of the iceberg. And there's this massive amount of knowledge that's beyond us. And it's so mysterious and so humbling. But I don't, I said it to Michael Behe, and I'm saying this because I said it to his face before, and I actually have a debate with him on Pat Flynn's podcast, where two scientists debated intelligent design. And I said the same thing, like, I look at the periodic table and I think that's intelligent design. I look at anything, the way the atoms are organized, the way the bonding rules affect everything that we know on this planet Earth physically. And so I just think they need to go bigger, that intelligent design is the way we look at the universe and with awe and wonder. And we know that it's intelligently designed even beyond our own comprehension. So it's not up to us to say that looks like intelligent design or that doesn't, that looks random. There is no absolute randomness. It's all divine providence. And it's just our job to try to figure things out. So I just always say go bigger. But then when we get into the arguments, it just takes a lot of time to work through it, because then people say, well, what is evolution then? What is microevolution? What is macroevolution? And you have to work through all that stuff. So it's interesting, but it seems to come and go.
Well, yeah, but let me ask you this: there's a certain way in which, as a Christian person, or even I could probably say the same thing just as a follower of Aristotle's insights, that we have to hold that the universe is designed, that it has, because it's a creation. It's not just some kind of brute fact or something like that. It's a creation. So it has a creator, and the creator is intelligent, and so it's imbued with intelligent design. But I'm not obligated to say a particular aspect of the creation was made one way or another. I don't have to. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, am I stating your position accurately? That of course it's filled with design because it's a creation, but you don't have to go, well, that right there, that has to be designed, and that over there is not.
Because when you say this is, it implies that something is not, and it gives the impression, and I don't think they actually mean to give this impression, but the language they use, the intelligent design theorists, is that it gives the impression that if this particular thing passes our test for intelligence, then we're going to call it perceptible intelligent design.
Right.
And I'm like, that feels to me like we're giving God a test on intelligence. And I don't want to be part of that. And so, but I think it does give that concept to younger people, especially, or people new to the issue. It sounds like, oh, look right there, this thing is intelligent design. Look, we can tell. I'm convinced now it's intelligent. There must be a God. It almost sounds like what Richard Dawkins was accusing a long time ago. We're trying to sneak God in through the back door.
Yeah, like the God of the gaps.
And I'm frankly, I think in this faith and science debate, we need to stop being apologists. I don't know if I'm using that word the right way, but we need to stop being on the defensive.
Yeah.
I'm ready just to stand up on that hill and say, hey, y'all, everybody, when I look out at the universe, I'm thanking God for everything down to the last atom and subatomic particle. And I look at it, like you were saying, Sai, with eyes of appreciation, because I see that it's all intelligently designed, and it's my job in life. When I do science, I feel like I'm seeing into the mind of God in a very privileged way. And go on the offensive more, like say to the atheist, and if any of you are listening, go ahead and call in, let's talk about it. Say to the atheist, like, your worldview doesn't make sense the way my worldview makes sense, because I can look at it all, science, theology, philosophy, even my relationships and motherhood, and it all hangs together for me. It all makes sense thanks to the Catholic Church. So what do you have? I mean, because I think atheists have a lot of problems they're kind of like truncated at science, and they're not going to look beyond that.
I see.
Science isn't going to answer their biggest questions.
888-318-7884 is the number. Dr. Stacy Trasenkos is our guest. We're talking faith and science this hour. If you have a faith and science question, whatever angle you come at it from is welcome. And if you are not a person who shares our faith, we really do want you to feel welcome. We enjoy these conversations, and you bring a lot to the program. You're not taking up anybody's time. We'd love to talk with you. 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Hi, this is Brother John Bosco Mills. In our world, there are so many words and so many images, and they all have different messages, and they're giving us different messages. We need Catholic radio because we need to hear the voice of truth. And the voice of truth is the one that tells us about Jesus and his church. And the Catholic radio gives us that truth.
The world needs EWTN Catholic Radio, now more than ever.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's a beautiful Monday afternoon. You might have heard we had a hurricane or a tropical storm. It was a hot tropical storm by the time it got to us here in California. And just a little update. We're all fine here. The studios are fine. Some of the folks who live out in the mountains, they got a nasty storm, one that frightened some people. And those of us who live down inland or on the shore got almost nothing. We got what wasn't even a very impressive rainstorm. So it's a tale of two storms here, but everything in Catholic Answers seems well. Everybody made it into work today, despite some people having an awful lot of rain if they lived on the backside of the mountains. And we only have a few of those here who live on the backside of the mountains or out in the deserts. We don't have anybody working here who lives out in the desert, but friends of ours do, like Rose Sweet, and they got soaking out there. But thanks for everybody who was concerned about us. And we seem to be we're having earthquakes, fires, rainstorms. It's almost like somebody's trying to punish this state. I don't actually think that's the case, but it seems like it sometimes. 888-318-7884. We're talking faith and science this hour with Dr. Stacy Trasancos. And there's already a bunch of folks on the line. Dr. Trasancos, you want to take some calls?
Sure.
Okay, let's start with, let me just get my list up here. Let us go to, I thought I had my list up here. Hang on, I'm getting there. We will start with James in Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. James, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
Hi, I loved your book, Science Was Born of Christianity, and I've given it to you as a gift a few times. And to me, it's an excellent telling of how, while humanity was created in the image of God, all of humanity, and we can perceive nature and rediscover the thoughts of things, as Kepler said. I think you mentioned that in the book, that there's a true faith because the cultural psychology of the world, of all religion, of all peoples, is the fruit of the faith of a people, as T.S. Eliot said eloquently. And my question is, are you going to be integrating that thesis into your philosophy? And I was wondering if you'd talk about the philosophy of what you're doing and how that book is integrated with your thesis.
Wow. Thank you for asking that question. I mean, how much time do we have, Cy? Like, how much time?
Take the rest of the hour. You got 45 minutes. Go ahead.
No, thank you so much. No, that makes it, it's like you get it. You understand what I'm trying to do. And that makes me feel like I'm on the right track. The understanding the philosophy has been a big part. I mean, I keep going back to what Father Yockey taught, that what I just said about ID theory, it's all Father Yockey. I learned that from him. And I keep going back to that book, Science Was Born of Christianity, and that teaching, and it just becomes more and more and more powerful to me how having this worldview is so singular among the religions that have ever been. I mean, to look at the world as created by a triune God, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and to have had, the ancient Greeks thought the world was only begotten, emanating, that nature was emanating from the first mover, which took me a long time to understand the difference between emanation and creation. But there's an infinite difference in the two. Creation is solidly the handiwork of God. It's God created this. It's something he did. He didn't have to. He did it out of love and goodness, and there's purpose. Whereas emanation, it's just sort of this thing arising from the first mover and eternally cycling, and the forms were always there. Whereas with creation, the forms of things, the nature of things, it took me forever to understand what it means to have a nature. It is from God. It's ultimately, that's what philosophy is going to lead to, is it hands off to theology, and it's from God. And so it really is filling it in how it all makes sense. And it's very significant to me to understand how Aristotle got through physics to the first mover and then on to metaphysics. the light bulbs are just clicking. And I mean, at my age as a grandmother and having all this life experience to look back on, it is so exciting. And I'm trying to get back to writing. I've kind of had a year or two off from writing because we've had some stuff going on in our family. And I'm really excited to get back into writing and back into an engagement with atheists. I have an atheist friend who tells me on Facebook, I hope he's listening, that the atheists today who are really serious are kind of tired of new atheism and the Richard Dawkins version. They're ready for something more substantial. And so I'm looking forward to getting into more of those dialogues, because I always felt like I was out of my depth when it came to philosophy, because I hadn't read those works and I wasn't up on it. So yes, it's all making more sense. Yes, I'm going to do more writing, and thank you so much for asking about that.
All right.
Okay. And I hope you're taking care of Bishop Strickland. I know he's a friend of yours.
I saw him yesterday. Yes.
Great.
Praying.
James, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate the call.
Thanks for your ministry.
Well, thank you. Let's go to William in Kansas City, listening on 102.7 FM. William, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
Well, thanks for taking my call. I don't really have a question, just kind of a loose comment about philosophy and your guest. I was excited to hear that she is so well-rounded with chemistry and philosophy, and I was excited recently about philosophy, and I guess I was naive, even though I'm old. You know, you start looking at the timeline of things, and, you know, when we think of BC starting, okay, and most of the philosophers came before that, and, you know, for them to realize that what really made people happy and what was good and not good was before Jesus Christ even came. So we're kind of all post-dated, that we're in a different era than they were then. And so I guess I just think it's interesting that they realized being with family, being with friends, that was some of the most important things in life versus running after money or sex or love or something not normal. I didn't mean love at the end, but lust, I think I should have said. But I don't know if you have any comment of that, of how, I don't even know if young kids think about philosophers nowadays that, hey, much less Jesus, but I guess the timeline is what got me started thinking about that, and I'll just listen off the air.
Okay, William, thank you. Thanks very, very much.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I mean, when you were talking, I was thinking about, I have this book here at my desk because I was showing it to Cy, Walker Percy's Lost in the Cosmos. And I love how he starts out that book. Cy gave me this book about 5 years ago, and I very much appreciate what he says in the beginning about how we can study science or study the stars or study things out there and know more about them than we do about ourselves. And my whole journey into the Catholic faith, and then my continuing journey as a Catholic, studying theology and philosophy while raising 7 kids and now having 7 grandkids. I mean, my whole journey through all of that, it has been a journey to get to know myself better, just like Pope St. John Paul II says in Fides et Ratio, to know thyself. And it is hard, like Walker Percy said, to know yourself. And that's the most important message we need to be telling our young people today, because the culture tells them the opposite. The culture tells them you don't need to discover who you are. You just need to figure out and label yourself who you are. You just need to say, I'm this gender, or I'm that identity, or whatever. And it is confusing them. I've seen it. And I'll just add one more thing. My husband and I do a pro-life teen camp every summer. And it is so powerful. Like, not only do those kids learn about abortion and pro-life apologetics, we had Carlo Broussard down there last summer. He's an excellent pro-life speaker. The kids really learn what it means to be pro your own life, because we have them together for 12 hours a day, forging relationships. New relationships are born there because we teach them how to to be together, how to be face to face and do things together and have fun together and get excited about friendships and growing together. So we tell them, we're able to tell them about philosophy and theology and pro-life stuff, but we're also able to show it to them in all of the things that we do with them together. It's a very special week. And I think that's the antidote to the war that we're in right now. I think we are in a war in our culture. And I think FaceTime, like real time being with people, that's how you bring philosophy and theology and science and who we are as humans all together.
Thank you very much for the call. He said that he would listen off the air, and he did, and I appreciate the call very, very much. Dr. Stacy Trasancos is our guest. Dr. Trasancos will be joining a crew of us from Catholic Answers heading down south. And when I say south, I mean far south, Perth, Australia, in October. And are you going to talk about faith and science down there in Perth, Australia?
Yes, we're talking about the Eucharist. So I'm going to do some talks about Eucharistic miracles and my work there.
It's awful nice down there in Perth,
isn't
it? And Michael and all the folks, and Michael and Joe and everybody at Evangelization Australia is kind enough to bring us down there, and they organize these big events. If you want to come, check it out. Check out Evangelization Australia. Just put in Evangelization Australia, but use an S because they don't use a Z down there. I don't know what's the matter with them, but they spell evangelization. And so put that in there and find out because you can see Dr. Stacy in person. I'll be there. Tim Staples will be there. Chris Check, our president. I think he's a 50-50, right? Is he going? Stacy, do you know? Did you
I think he's going. Yeah,
you think he's going? All right.
I think Michael, I think so. That was the impression I got.
Okay.
I hope so.
All right. Yeah, I hope so too. Greg's in Dixon City, Pennsylvania, listening on 104.5 FM. Awful glad you're here, Greg. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Trasancos.
Yes, hi. My question is really simple, and I probably books on this topic, which I should read, and I apologize. I'm not much of a reader, or I should have researched this years ago. But my thing was how would I approach the discussion of, say, a friend of mine who claims to be intelligent and not that they don't believe in the faith, but they're not really much of a partaker of the faith. But like, how would you discuss the topic of like the idea of evolution? Well, how do you discuss, like, how do you debate that between like what Charles Darwin discovered and everything like that, and then talk about like how did God create all this?
Got it, Greg. All right. How do you talk about it, Dr. Trasancos?
I would find out what your friend knows first, because I find that people are all over the place when it comes to evolution. They bring together all these things they've heard said before, and most of the time, people that I talk to don't actually understand the mechanisms of evolution that we're talking about. And when you explain that this is what we mean when we say evolution in biology, then that takes care of a whole lot of the discussion, because it shows that we're not afraid of the science. We're not afraid to say we can look at populations of living things and see that gene frequencies change over time with successive populations based on influences from the environment. That's the the random part is the genetic mutation, how the DNA comes together when parents produce offspring. And then the not random part is how the environment selects for different individuals to be able to mate and get their offspring into the next generation better. But when you break it all down and you show them what we're actually talking about when we say chance in evolution, which, like I said before, it's not really chance. It's just, it looks like chance to us. It's chance to us in the same way that when two parents have a child, it's chance whether that child's going to have blue eyes like mom or brown eyes like dad. They don't know, and there's no way to predict it. But God knows, right? So it's not absolute chance. It's just seems like chance to us. But when you start explaining things like that, it sets the table for a good conversation, because evolution is never going to be a quick conversation. And I would start with finding out what the other person knows, And then not to plug my book, Particles of Faith, but the longest chapter in there is on evolution. So if you really want a scientific review and a theological review, just the basics, I wrote it for that purpose. And then just be willing to talk to the person, but make sure you understand the things you're saying too. Like, don't start talking about micro and macro evolution until you understand what those terms mean. And it makes for some good conversation.
Just on a basic level, Stacy, what about the person who makes us try to choose between the Bible and evolution? Do you have a quick response to that?
We all know that we don't read the Bible literally, because no one thinks that the only consequence of original sin was the change in position of 4 eyelids.
You're going to have to explain that to me when we come back. I have no idea. Yeah. Wait, what? All right. Greg, hang on. We'll get that answer when we come back right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Is relativism dead? It sure seems dead. Each day, new moral demands are made, and they are presented to us as absolutes. Everything, from transgender ideology to physician-assisted suicide, is presented as a moral good that all right-thinking people must accept. But Catholic Answers' own Carlo Broussard says look deeper, and you will see today's moralism is just relativism dressed up in new clothes. Carlo's eye-opening book, The New Relativism, shines a light on how the sacred moral teachings of this age cover up a deep denial of moral truth. Order your copy of The New Relativism today at shop.catholic.com and be prepared to defend the truth against aggressive relativism. The New Relativism at shop.catholic.com, or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers Monthly Giving Club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
In These 12, The Gospel Through the Apostles' Eyes, best-selling author Rod Bennett gives a riveting re-examination of gospel events from the ground floor perspective of Christ's own hand-picked successors. In his trademark storytelling style, Bennett movingly depicts what it was like for the apostles to witness Jesus' teaching and miracles up close. Why did he call them, and what did he intend for them to do? Order your copy of These 12 today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I never heard that before. I don't know what Dr. Stacy Trasancos is talking about, so we're going to have to find out from her. We're talking faith and science today. If you've got a question regarding faith and science, whatever view you're coming from, and whether you have faith or do not, you're welcome to call and ask your question, 888-318-7884. Dr. Stacy Trasancos knows her Catholic theology, and she knows her science. And so if that's a conversation I've been wanting to ask somebody about these things, well, this is your chance, 888-318-7884. Before we went to the break, she said, we don't take the first chapters of Genesis literally because nobody thinks it's about eyelids or something like that. I don't know. What was that, Stacy? Well, okay. What?
I use that. So I got it from Father Yockey, okay, to give credit. That is something it's one of the reasons I fell in love with his work. Everybody knows we don't read Genesis 100% literally, because when it says in Genesis 3 that after Adam and Eve sinned, they disobeyed God and ate the fruit, their eyes were opened.
Yeah.
And if we read it literally, that would mean the only consequence of original sin was that their eyes moved, their eyelids moved. And we don't take that literally. Obviously, right. Their eyes were opened has a figurative meaning that's much deeper, much truer, much more real. It's just a figure of speech. And so it's okay to say in Genesis that some of it is figurative. But I mean, this is why the conversation can go on forever. I'm always really quick to say right after that, I am not one of these people who's in the camp of there were multiple first men. I don't think Adam was a population of men. I have defended and will continue to defend that I do think there was an Adam and Eve. I don't see any compelling reason to deny that Adam and Eve existed. And so if there's no compelling reason to deny that they existed, why would we? And that's an ongoing debate among theologians. There are people who think the first man was a population of men because evolution doesn't look at individual. Evolution doesn't say any species starts with just two individuals. It emerges in populations. But that we also believe in miracles. We believe in special creation and miracles both. And so absolutely, God could have created Adam and Eve. It's just not the business of evolution to ever find them. That's not how evolutionary science works.
No, because it's not a science question. It's a history question, and we don't have any history from that time. We don't have any. There are no historians standing around looking and going, "Oh, there's the first one right there. There's the first human being." It's prehistoric, in other words. Greg, I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very, very much. I never heard the eyelid thing before, Greg, so thanks for occasioning that. TJ's in Virginia, listening on the EWTN app. TJ, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasancos.
How you doing, Si? How you doing, Dr. Stacy?
Very well, thank you.
So, a couple things I'd like to say. I'm a fan of Jimmy's Mysterious World. That's like a big thing. I like to listen to it a lot. So I'm into the science and all the paranormal and sci-fi type stuff and all that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of like just go out and try to get the question out as best as I can. If there was ways to say become an advanced like in technology to the point to where we could live longer, or space exploration, all that stuff, is there any way that we could like do it like ethically, I guess is the question, or how that, I guess that's just my question.
Yeah, it's a good one because that's very realistic. This stuff's coming, so we need to answer these moral questions.
Yeah, and you're asking about transhumanism, I think. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. I kind of like to listen to some things about it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a big movement, the transhumanist movement.
It is. It's a big movement, and it's full of deception. So there's really two different questions. There's one question that says, could the human race continue to evolve? And I say yes, we are continuing to evolve. Will we evolve into a new species? I don't think anybody can answer that. And we're human. We are what we are. We are made in the image and likeness of God. We are human. Could there be enough changes where we evolve into something else one day? No one knows the answer to that. It doesn't seem possible right now, so I don't think it's even on the horizon. The transhumanism that's kind of a question like, could there be aliens out there? There could be. What do we do if we see one? I like what Brother Guy Consolmagno said. Would you baptize an alien? He said, if one asked me to, because there's intelligence there. But so it's good to be ready for those kind of questions if it ever comes to that. If we ever get to a point where someone says, hey, the human race has evolved into a new species, there's going to be decades-long debate on whether that's actually true or not. It's going to be sorted out. It's good to be ready for that as Catholics. No one's talking about that right now, though. What the transhumanism that's actually being talked about is not honest. The transhumanism that's being pushed on people right now is this idea that we're close to being able to upload your brain. So that's into a computer so that you would be immortal. And that was like Ray Kurzweil from Google was predicting we'd have been able to do that several years ago, and we didn't. But the idea there is that it fundamentally says that we aren't body and rational soul made in the image and likeness of God, that we are our brain. We are just our body. We are just material, and that our brain is just functioning. If it has anything that emerges from it like a mind, it's just this electrical emergent mind that comes from the brain. It's a bottom-up proposition. It doesn't take into account anything supernatural. And so if that's what they think, that's all we are, and they say, hey, I can upload your brain into a computer, and when your body dies, you will live on because your brain will be in the computer. Now give me $500,000 to do this. Well, then you die. Who's going to be able to be around to say that's not actually me in the computer? You know, so it's things like that are coming, though. It's those kind of ideas that we can become something like that. But it's like Aristotle says, a small mistake in the beginning can lead to huge errors. And the small mistake in the beginning is this idea that we're just body, that we're not body and soul. And if you don't believe in God, I mean, Aristotle figured out that we're body and soul, but they, for different reasons. But I don't see how you can really maintain that unless you believe in God. And so that right there, that whole thing you're talking about is a reason to evangelize, to let people know they are more than just the particles that make them up.
TJ, thank you very much for the question. Stacy, do you know Father Tad Pacholczyk? Have you? Because we did an interview with him on transhumanism. It's called The Ethical Dilemma of Transhumanism on our Catholic Answers Focus podcast. So TJ, if you want that, just put in transhumanism, Catholic Answers, and it'll come up somewhere. The Ethical Dilemma of Transhumanism, from the perspective of a very well-respected Catholic ethicist. Because, as you said, Dr. Stacy, a small mistake in the beginning is a disaster in the end. Let's go to Kyle in Wisconsin, listening. Well, I don't know where Kyle's listening, but I just know he's in Wisconsin. Kyle, go ahead with your question.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Yes. I was going to ask Dr. Tracy if she's familiar with the transcendental arguments for the existence of God from philosophy. I could explain my understanding of it. I find it a very powerful tool to debate atheists, because she had mentioned how philosophy helps her approach atheists. Should I explain my view of it, or have her talk?
Yeah.
Can you do it quickly, Kyle?
Yes. So basically, a lot of atheists say there's no such thing as right and wrong. But that's a logical contradiction, because how can you be right that there's no such thing as right? When they argue with you, they're assuming that there is a right position to take, and they can convince you, which is an objective truth. Now, objective truth goes all the way back to Plato. And as we all know, St. Augustine was a Platonist. And I know Aristotle is very popular in the church. But to me, that logical foundation goes back to Plato. God is logos, and ethos and pathos, all of those things in philosophy. And I find that very powerful. And I wish I had learned that when I was younger, because I knew there was something very wrong when I would engage with atheists. I don't know if you would like to discuss that, or if that makes sense.
No, I agree with you completely. And I mean, what's really sad is I wouldn't have even been able to follow you a couple of years ago. That's how important I think it is that we learn philosophy. You don't know what you don't know. And it makes me sad that it took me this long to get here. But I also realize that it's never a quick argument. It's just like with evolution. It's never going to be, you're going to have this 10-minute conversation with someone and you're going to tell them what they need to know. I'm realizing now that whole, living the life of faith, being a good role model, it also comes in the way we engage with people. And it's not good. There's no magic bullet, that's how they say. There's no one right way. But I love what you just said, because as I've been reading these early Greek documents, I just keep thinking this is the foundation that you would want to sit down with someone with, like the Timaeus, or some of the writings where Socrates is having, some of Plato's writings where Socrates is having these dialogues, to sit down with someone and say, look, we're not going to just do this in 10 minutes, because that's not the intellectual way to go through something. It's not that simple. And a lot of times the atheists, I get the impression they want a simple answer. They think they have it figured out. But when you start reading through some of those dialogues, and chewing on it and working on it and figuring out what it says. And if you can do that with someone that you're engaging with, have ready, maybe in your free time, have ready some passages that you would show them and say, what do you think this means? Because then it really invites you in. It's hard. It's hard thinking to follow, for me anyway, to follow Plato's writings and to follow what Socrates was arguing, all that stuff about justice and how do we know it's objectively true and what is it anyway, and nobody could define it. It's really hard to follow, but as you start working on it and trying to be able to understand it, it just opens up your mind to so many other things. And then you're like, oh, I see where they're going now. And then when you understand their arguments, and that's what people today don't do, when you actually understand their arguments, you see where it's going. And then you're like so excited because yeehaw, I'm so glad that Christ came and made sense of all of this and fulfilled it. Like now we know the fullness of the truth. Now we know how this ends. So it's great that you know about that and that you can articulate it so well. And I would just say, when you engage with your friends, just be ready for it to be a long time.
What a great point. And we there is no real shortcuts here. These kind of questions are answered over long conversations in relationship, unless, of course, the Holy Spirit gets involved and settles the matter. There's a certain kind of Christian approach that looks at paganism as the enemy. And that's... it doesn't sound like you see these pagan philosophers as the enemy.
No, and I used to think they were the enemy. I would just kind of like pass over and think, oh yeah, I understand what the unmoved mover was. I understand what the uncaused cause is. I understand what Aristotle was saying, but I didn't. I didn't understand. I didn't even know that I didn't understand it. And And so I was antagonistic to them, like, oh, they were the pagans. They didn't know what they were talking about. Thank goodness Christ came and we set them all straight. No, it's not like that. You really do start to understand the fullness of the truth, that Christ came in the fullness of time to reveal the things that we needed to know to continue on from there. And it is heartbreaking to be alive today in this world, but not of this world, and to know that stuff and to want, what did they write about in the ethics? They wrote about happiness. And it's heartbreaking to know all of that and understand what it means to say, I want to be happy. And then to encounter people that are so far back. I'm not saying I'm down the path like I'm super smart or anything, but they're so far back there. They don't even realize they should be reading the ancient Greek works. They don't realize they should be listening to what Christ revealed. They're just so lost and in such darkness and in such pain. And to them, it probably seems like they're never going to find a way to be happy. And it breaks my heart when I hear people like that, because you want to have that relationship with him. And, I'm sure everybody who evangelizes knows that feeling. You want everybody to go to heaven. You want to go to heaven and you want everybody to come too. And I've learned as I've got older that to look at the world not as my stage, but as everybody else's stage. And I'm just a player on some other people's stages who God wants me to be in the life of. And so I've started really investing in the relationships I have more, with that in mind, because it just takes time. And that's the only way, like you said it, Cy, the only way you're going to do that is through relationship.
Dr. Stacy Trasancos is our guest. Kyle, thanks very much for the call. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more conversation about faith and science on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Hi friends, Janet Williams here. Join me every Wednesday on Women of Grace Live as I welcome New Age researcher and blogger for Women of Grace, Sue Brinkman. Sue and I will be talking about all the wacky things that could distract you from your faith. Psychics, yoga, Reiki, crystals, acupuncture, Ouija boards, tarot cards, and astral traveling are just a few of the stranger things we discuss. That's why we call it Wacky Wednesday. So join us every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Stacy Trasenko is the author of Particles of Faith, here with us, talking about faith and science. Some people would say the conflict between faith and science, but we don't say that because we don't see a conflict, because there has not ever been a demonstrable conflict between faith and science. But if you disagree, you're welcome to call too, 888-318-7884. Rita is in New York listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Rita, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Stacy Trasenkos.
Yeah, well, as a physician myself, I'm having a particular situation. Is my patients are coming to me in different situations. One was a female, 23 years old. She delivered a baby last year, and she was asked what she wanted, put the sex of the name, what she wanted the sex of the baby be. It was a boy, but they will refuse to write boy. They wanted the mom to decide on that. So how does she feel about it? How can we review it? I am a physician. I know what I would do. Mm-hmm. So, but how can she? I will go through DNA testing, to make it there. But how will she reconcile this too? Because this is spilling now into children. Another patient came to me and told me that now they're putting litter boxes into the toilet in elementary school because now some kids identify with dogs, cats, and they're biting other children and they want to pee in litter boxes. Central New York.
Wow.
How would you do this? This is something getting out of hand.
All right.
So I need her.
Yeah, Dr. Stacy. Let's start with the transgender stuff. I mean, they're asking the mom to tell them the sex of the baby.
Mm-hmm. And this is the tragedy that we're going. I mean, I think there is an orchestrated effort out there. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it sure feels like there's somebody trying to break the family up. They're trying to break up the family by confusing people about their gender, by putting these ideas in their head. I'm not surprised you're dealing with that, and I'm going to try to keep it quick because we're running out of time. But look, the fact that you are in this situation and that it's bothering you and that you know better, that very well could be God telling you that you have to take a stand. And this is one thing I've learned in a lot of different areas in my life. When there's something that comes along and you don't like it and you know better, you owe it to the next generation to stand up and fight that where you are. And I don't mean you have to fight like you have to make a lot of controversy. You might have to, but we have to learn to stand up to the people where we are and say, this isn't right. And I'm not going to be a part of it. And it's kind of like, you have to have an informed conscience, and you have to be able to stand up to the people who are trying to violate your conscience and say, I'm not going there, because we have to start going on the offensive. We have to start saying, no, this is enough. I'm not going to go along with this because it's a lie. And this isn't how things work. And this isn't how you do right by a child. This isn't how you do right by the family. And then you have to find the right people to talk to. My husband and I help with that a lot. We've helped a lot of people just think through how to stand up, and we've seen a lot of fruit. So if you want to email him, he'll help you with that. But I'm serious. Like, when something bothers you like that, it's probably God putting it on your heart to take a stand for the sake of those children.
Well, let me just ask you, as a scientist, or as a physician, our caller. This strikes the normal person, like not the person with the advanced education you have, but just a regular person, as completely unscientific. This looks like the rejection of science. This doesn't look like the rejection of faith, or this doesn't look like I'm not saying this as a person of faith. Like, this looks like if you look at a boy, you know the difference between a boy and a girl. It's not science to say that's not true. It's some other thing. This looks like a new religion or something to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is that how you feel about it, Dr. Stacy?
Oh, I thought you were asking the caller. I'm sorry.
Oh, I can go to the caller. Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I definitely do feel that way.
Doctor.
I'm sorry. Which doctor?
Yeah, Rita in New York.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I'm very Catholic, and I do the rosary all the time. And it happened once, and I got called in, and I cried. I came back crying to my hotel, and I said, God, how can I help you? And I do the rosary all the time. In my heart, by the sternum, a deep voice of a man inspires fear and respect. He said, shut up. The apostle had it worse. I got startled, and I shut up.
Well,
So, yes.
that's right. But it doesn't
Shut
feel...
up. The apostle had worse.
That's right. They did face worse, and they weren't afraid to stand up for the truth. But it's very odd that we're in the position now, not so much of defending the faith, but defending basic reality, that when a child is born, except in extremely rare cases, maybe 1 in 10,000 or something, by looking at the child, you know the sex of the child. What kind of weird world is it where you have to, like?
Well, what happened was, but in my opinion, you know what happened is when we took church from schools, from hotels, from places, that when God came out, the devil came in. The atheists, the American founders of the atheists in United States. She was the founder, and I have a whole story about her.
I think you're probably talking about Madeleine Murray O'Hair.
Yes, Marilyn. Yes. And she was in the. You should do a show in the worst 10 brutal murders in the United States.
Oh, okay.
You should do what she was, and she was in there, and that she was the founder, and all it was because of love. She had a lover. She went to Rome. She fell in love with a Catholic Roman guy, got pregnant, and he wouldn't leave the wife. So she came to the States, changed the name, and told her child not to pray. He got bullied, came home, she started writing letters. Fast forward, he became Catholic. He was only saved. She outcast him. She had a second son, a granddaughter, and then one day they were all missing, the 3 of them.
Oh, I remember
she
that.
She had 600.
Oh, yeah.
She's an atheist. She's the founder. She has 500,000 or 600,000 in the account, and the treasurer embezzled $50,000. So she called the police, and he later was interviewed, and his girlfriend was interviewed, and he said he was dreaming about a way to dismembering her. Fast forward.
Good Lord.
He kidnapped all of them with another guy. Yeah, he kidnapped her, the 3 of them. The only one saved was the old son that he turned Catholic. They all that were found dismembered. You should do a report. So
well, it's not. You just did a report. I don't have to do a report, doctor. You just did the report. That's a lot. But I mean, I guess Dr. Rita's take is that when you took God out of the schools, the devil came in, and I wouldn't argue with that. But it also seems to me that we got used, as a culture, we got very used to just lying about basic biological facts when we started calling babies in the womb clumps of cells. I think they educated an entire society about how to lie about basic biological facts, and now it's rearing its ugly head when it comes to obvious basic things like a boy is not a girl.
Yep, and it's just going to take a lot of people speaking up to start to turn that around.
Dr. Stacy Trasancos has been our guest. You got a website you want to give anybody? How do people find out about you?
Try to spell my name, stacytrasancos.com. If you get anything close to it, you'll find me.
Stacy Trasancos. I remember I did the whole first interview I did with you. I pronounced your last name about 4 different ways in the course of one interview.
It happens all the time.
But I've learned it. Dr. Stacy Trasancos. Look her up and find out what she's up to. Thank you, Doctor. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Ty.
Coming up, we've got Ask a Priest. Who's the guest? Oh, yeah. Father Keller. That's right. Father Paul Jerome Keller will be here. If you've got a question that you've been wanting to ask a Catholic priest, now's your chance. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. So happy to be back here with you on a sunny Monday here in Southern California. Thanks very much for being here with us. As promised, this hour, we have Ask a Priest hour for you. So if you've got a question that you've been thinking, I'd like to ask a Catholic priest that, whether you're Catholic or not, Father Paul Jerome Keller is our guest, and the number is 888-318-7884. Father Keller is a Dominican priest, the author of a whole bunch of stuff, including A Year with the Eucharist. That's a daily meditation on the Eucharist, 101 questions and answers on the sacraments of healing, a Lenten journey with Jesus Christ and St. Thomas Aquinas. Father Keller, thank you for being with us.
It's great to be with you, Cy. Thanks very much.
And just before we went on the air, you said something and I didn't get to ask you about it. You just did a 3-hour question and answer panel, or what were you doing?
We had a Ask a Priest session at the Columbus Catholic Museum here in Columbus, Ohio. And we had, it was I don't know if it was invitation only, but there were a good 50 people, 3 hours of questions for priests for three of us on a panel.
Wow.
It was really fun, actually.
So what kind of stuff did people like did anything stand out, like, oh, I didn't know so many people would be interested in this or that, or no?
It's sort of like Catholic Answers Live. It's like people ask great questions and then I promptly forget what they are. Because everybody will say, well, what was the best question that was on air? And I don't know what you're talking about.
Go listen to the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you're not in Columbus and you couldn't make it out that night, we've got Father Keller here for you. 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We will start in Oklahoma with Aaron watching on YouTube. Aaron, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Father Keller.
Yes, Father Keller. My name is Aaron Cadeno. I have a question about a English translation of a papal encyclical from Pius II, I believe, dated from the 1400s, regarding the condemnation of aliens in the Catholic Church's official position. Is there a way to read that article, or has that been translated into modern-day English?
You know, Aaron, that's a great question. If it's the 15th century, chances are that it's not translated on the Vatican website, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's got to be a pretty... I'm sorry to say that I actually haven't heard of it. I don't know this document. But given all of the talk about aliens these days, I can't imagine that someone hasn't translated it somewhere online. Cy, do you know anything about that?
No, I was just trying to look it up to see if I could find anything. Pius II on aliens, condemning aliens?
Cum Sicut, November 19th, 1459, by Pius II. His declaration of the Catholic Church to condemn aliens, the notion that other worlds and other physical beings with souls. It should be pointed out that classical definitions of man and goes on and so forth. But apparently the name is Cum Sicut, dated November 19th, 1459.
I don't have...
Is there a way to get that copy?
Well, you can go... They've done a pretty good job of getting all the major Catholic documents on Vatican.va. And so right. I would look there, but I'm looking up that spelling, and I don't see a thing. I don't see a thing on there. So I don't know if that's a real encyclical or not. I really don't. I wouldn't say it's not, because I've only searched now for 30 seconds, but I don't see it, and I don't know if it is. I'll tell you what we could do is, if you want to shoot it to us in an email, we'll look into it for you. And the way you can get us an email to us is radio@catholic.com. Other than that, I don't know, unless there's something else you want to say, Father. I don't know how else we can be helpful on that.
There is a document by Innocent X from the mid 17th century that starts Cum Sicut Accepimus, but I don't think that's the one you want.
Which everyone knows, translating cum sicut accepimus means with, I don't know. I don't actually know.
Since we accept, or as we accept, I
Oh.
think it is.
Oh, okay. That might be it. You might look into that one. So that was Innocent which Innocent?
That was Innocent the 10th.
Innocent the 10th.
But
And-
that's not till the mid-17, that's 1648.
So Aaron, radio@catholic.com if you want to go further with that question. radio@catholic.com. I'm going to go to Donald now in New Jersey, listening on Domestic Church Media. Donald, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hi, Father. I have a question about the crucifix. Sometimes I contemplate it in my mind. I have it on the wall in my living room of my apartment. And over the years, I've interpreted as meaning, gee, I'm so sinful. I did that to Jesus. I put him on the cross and nailed his hands and feet into the wood. And I'm responsible for that. And another way, I'm trying to think about it now as, well, Jesus went through that for me. And doesn't that mean he loves me? Because he wouldn't have done that otherwise if he didn't want to save us. I'm struggling with that point of view. I've been taking the negative view most of my life, and I guess I need more trust in Jesus by taking the positive view. I'm not sure.
Well, great question, Donald. I think you actually have hit on something very important that's true for all of us, is that we need to trust more in Jesus. We need to trust in God and not approach our salvation in a way that makes it as if we are absolutely decrepit beings. You know, there was a heresy that started in France and spread like wildfire a couple centuries ago called Jansenism. And Jansenism really plays on guilt, the guilt that people feel about their own sins, and really plays up the sinfulness of any given individual and so forth and so on. And while it's true that we are sinners and that we need redemption, it is more, we might be able to say it's more true that God loves us in spite of our sinfulness. He doesn't love us when we're good, because quite frankly, we can never be really good, really perfect. So we cannot earn God's love. So that second way that you're beginning to think about the crucifix that you see hanging in your apartment is really the right way, and I might say the Catholic way to understand. Now, did you and I put Jesus on the cross? In a certain sense, yes. We weren't there historically, so obviously we didn't do it that way. But our sins have contributed to his suffering. But that's only part of the story. He himself wanted to go through that suffering for love of us, just as any one of us who loves someone else would be willing to do whatever love costs, right? You hear these stories, for instance, of a family member or a friend giving an organ, say a kidney donation to a loved one. Well, can you imagine? You have to, if you're the picture of health, you now are going to go to the hospital, have yourself cut open to get a kidney out to give to a loved one, and there's no guarantee that it's going to work for your loved one. But the amount of suffering that goes into that wonderful act of giving an organ that one can afford to not use is a small image, I think, of the incarnation, that God became man because he loved us so much. He loves us so much, and that he insisted on taking the pain of our suffering, which culminated in the cross, so that we could have his life. So that second way that you're dealing with this question of putting Jesus on the cross is much better Does that make sense to you?
So you're saying that the sinfulness that I've had in my life is more or less the pain that I put Jesus through?
I'm saying that we have all contributed to the suffering of Christ on the cross, right? Not you alone. Has your sin been paid for on the cross? Yes, because our Lord came to suffer for you as well. You, me, everybody else in the world. But if we focus only on, I put Jesus on the cross, what's that going to do? What does that do to you? It probably brings you down, right? I mean, how do you pray? How do you trust in God with that kind of mentality? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does, Father.
Beautiful, Donald. Wonderful. Thank you very much for the call, and also for the reminder and the opportunity for Father to remind us we all need to trust in Jesus more fully. Nothing bad ever came from trust in Jesus. So, Donald, thank you very, very much. That does bring us to our break. We'll take a break. Be right back with more Ask a Priest on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
There is tremendous power in prayer because when we acknowledge that we don't have the power, but God does, things then begin to move for our good. Remember Matthew 19:26. But Jesus looked at them and said to them, "With men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible." Now that's power.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Hey, congratulations are going out to another longtime member of the EWTN radio family, Queen of Victory Radio in Butte, Montana, celebrating their 18th year with the EWTN network and family. Congratulations to Tom Downey and his team at KQOV. From all of us here at Catholic Answers and from the whole EWTN crew, congratulations, really. 18 years of Catholic radio in Montana. Beautiful. Father Paul Jerome Keller is our guest, and it's Ask a Priest this hour. There's one line open, 888-318-7884. We go now to Aaron in Hastings, Michigan, watching on YouTube. Aaron, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Hi, Father. Hi, Sai. Thanks for taking my call, guys.
Sure.
My question is, I've been told this a few times. How do I debunk in truth and in love, obviously, the statement that the Catholic Church is a quote-unquote cult, like with their sacramentals?
Okay.
Well, yeah, that's a good question, Aaron. The word cult is a tricky word because it can mean different things in different contexts. For instance, it's related to our word culture. So would we say that a particular culture, say American culture or European culture, is a cult? No. So there's a positive sense of the word of cult that has to do with worship, and then there's a negative sense of the word, a pejorative sense of the word cult that has to do with kind of a clique that you have to abide by the rules, so much so that if you don't, you'll be kicked out. There's no room for individuality. And there's kind of a brainwashing that goes on. Christianity is anything but brainwashing. Catholicism insists, quite frankly, that you use your brain not simply to say yes to everything that someone tells you, like a cult leader would do, but rather to assent to the truth. So the truth is presented to us, first of all, in the sacred scriptures, God himself speaking to us and asks us to assent to it. That's what we call faith, assenting to the truth of God. Furthermore, there are people that God has appointed to watch over us, our shepherds, and they help us to interpret the words that God is speaking to us. And they ask us to think about these very things. Catholicism is the farthest thing from the negative sense of cult, precisely because it insists that you think about the truths of the faith, that you assent to them in a free act of your own will, your own ability to ponder the truth and to say yes to it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
All right.
Good.
That's good. Aaron, you're all right. Thanks very, very much. I'm glad that makes sense. Let's see. We're going to Andy in Wilmington, North Carolina, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Andy, go ahead with your question for Father.
So I heard this recently. We were talking about Adam and Eve and the fall of man, and through sin is death is the result of their action. And I understand that. And so now death has entered the world for all peoples. But why do the animals die? Because they are without sin. They cannot sin, but they die. And so how did Adam and Eve's action against God affect animals, which seems like a natural thing? We were to sacrifice them anyhow. They were going to die through sacrifice. I don't understand fully. If you want to explain that. I don't see it in the catechism.
Sure. Well, I'm not a biologist, but I suspect that if Adam and Eve ate a plant, the plant died. That plant was transformed into them. So there is, I think we could speak about death in two different senses. The death that is the result of sin, which is a destructive kind of death, and the ending of life so that it progresses into something else. So I have heard, and I've never really studied this much for myself, but I've heard of some theologians talking about the possibility of Adam and Eve dying in the Garden of Eden so as to be brought into the full glory of heaven. Would God have eventually brought them into heaven, even when they had, even before Christ's coming to bring us into heaven? In other words, would God have transformed their experience of Eden into eternal life? After all, they were able to eat of the tree of life. But there's another part to this that I think is important, and that is that their sin affected everything in the universe. Death was introduced into the universe in a way that it never existed before. This disorder entered into the universe, into the relationship of Adam and Eve to God, the relationship of Adam and Eve to each other, their relationship to the world around them, the animals and the plants and so forth. So would the animals have died before sin? I don't know. I don't know how to answer. That's a speculative question that I'm not suited to answer, I don't think. But
I just thought it was the same, death being for man, which wasn't there in the original plan, until he sinned. Then I just thought the animals would but maybe death to animals was always to come, and not to man. Maybe that's it. I don't because we're animals meant to live forever. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that they were meant to live forever. Man is meant to live forever, and that's really the destruction of sin, is that we're meant to live forever, and now there's been this upset in the universe as a result of the disorder introduced by rebellion against God. So I think one thing that I'm always careful to try to point out is this was not just the eating of a piece of fruit from a tree. It's like, in the bigger scheme of things, that doesn't sound like such a bad thing that would upset the whole universe. What we're talking about is the description of an act of utter rebellion of Adam and Eve against God. So when we look at it in that way, we've introduced death, right? With the death of there's a death in the relationship with God, and that is bound to affect us physically. You cannot do anything with the soul that does not also affect the body. So there's a whole chain of events, a whole domino effect of choosing to rebel against God.
Andy, thank you. I'm going to leave it there because there are other folks on the line that would like to ask Father questions. It's Ask a Priest this hour. As lines open up, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Moses is in Phoenix, Arizona, listening to EWTN on channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Moses, glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Father Keller.
Yes. How are you doing, Father Paul?
Good. How are you, Moses? I've always wanted to talk to
thank
Moses.
Well, Moses is here. So here's my question. The particular judgment and the final judgment, right?
Yes, sir.
If Jesus comes on the final judgment to judge the living and the dead, aren't the dead don't they already go through the particular judgment? So why would he judge the dead at that point?
Yep. Okay. Good question. Thank you, Moses. First of all, I want to point out two places in the Catholic Catechism that speak about this in a very succinct way. And the first one is paragraph or section 1022. In section 1022, if I can just read it, it's short. Each man receives his eternal retribution in his immortal soul at the very moment of his death in a particular judgment that refers his life to Christ, either entrance into the blessedness of heaven through a purification or immediate and everlasting damnation. So that's the particular judgment. Then if you turn over to just a few more paragraphs on, there's a section on the last judgment, beginning at paragraph or section 1038. And there, the final judgment is described, and I'm not going to read it because it's rather lengthy, but it is the manifestation, the final judgment, the last judgment is the manifestation of all of the providential acts of God in our lives, individually and together, so that at the final judgment, we'll be made to understand how everything in our lives worked together for the glory of God. So the last judgment, let me just read paragraph 1040 for you. The last judgment will come when Christ returns in glory, and only the Father knows. This message of the last judgment calls us to conversion so that we can be ready for it. But prior to that, the Catechism speaks about the explanation, or how we will see how everything has worked together in our lives for according to God's plan, and how our rebellions have also denied that. So in the particular judgment, it's my coming before God and receiving my personal reward or lack of reward, whatever it is, whatever my just deserts are in the sight of Almighty God. The final judgment is, how does it all work together? Let me just use this analogy. It's sort of like at the final judgment, you'll see how your string fit into a larger tapestry. But at the final judgment, you will see how everyone's strings, lives fit together in that tapestry. So you'll be on the other side of the tapestry viewing this beautiful image of God's providential care for us.
What do you think,
Does that
Moses?
That was really good, Father Paul. That was awesome. We're praying for you, Father Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses.
Thank you very much. But Father Paul didn't invent this system. God invented it. So you're saying that it's really good, Father Paul, but all he did was describe it.
That's right.
All right.
Is that okay? Is that okay, Sai?
Yeah. I thought your description was very, very good. Yeah. Moses, thanks very, very much for the call. It's Ask a Priest this hour on Catholic Answers Live. Father Paul Jerome Keller is a Dominican priest, and your questions are welcome. 888-318-7884. You don't have to be Catholic to call. And if you've got something that you'd like to know about the Catholic faith, 888-318-7884. Want to get right to the core of Christ's saving message? Want a roadmap for living the life Christ calls you to? It's time to look again at the Beatitudes. In his new book, Heart of the Gospel, How the Beatitudes Show Us God's Plan for Happiness, Father Sebastian Walsh demonstrates compellingly how these 8 declarations make up the foundation, the essence, and the final goal of Jesus' teaching. Heart of the Gospel illuminates the scriptural passages from which we get the Beatitudes, explains the significance of their wording, their order, and their timing in Jesus' ministry. And it draws out edifying parallels and connections with salvation history and the lives of the saints. Most importantly, Father Walsh offers wise counsel from his own work as a priest and teacher to help you live the Beatitudes in your own life. Order your copy of Heart of the Gospel today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Father Paul Jerome Keller is our guest, and it's Ask a Priest. You are welcome to ask your question, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. I've been inviting you to come to the Catholic Answers conference, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to invite you again. Scott Hahn's going to be there, Dale Ahlquist, all of our guys, Jimmy and Tim and Trent and Carlo and Joe, all giving talks, and it's a very good topic. As the world is less and less connected to God, we're just taking the first line of the creed as our topic for the entire conference. I believe in God. Come hear what they all have to say about it. Just go to CatholicAnswersConference.com to find out more. It's the last full weekend of September right here in San Diego. CatholicAnswersConference.com. Father Paul Jerome Keller, Dominican priest, here to take your questions. Are you going to remember any of these questions, Father, or have you already forgotten the things that people have
I've already forgotten them. I'm so bad.
Well, no, it's not bad. Life goes forward, doesn't go backwards.
That's right. There you go.
Let's go to Carlos up in Canada, listening on Catholic.com. That's our website, Catholic.com. Carlos, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Father Keller.
Thank you. Yeah, so I had the question regarding what happens if a minor wants to join the church, but he's worried that his parents might not be, supporting him to join. Mm-hmm. And he's also worried that he read that outside of the church there's no salvation, so he's worried that their parents will be damned, basically.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty heavy. That's a pretty heavy question. So, what strikes me as you were talking, that something that just stood out is today, all these young people, teenagers or younger, are coming out, to use that worldly term, about what they how they feel attracted to one person or another. So everybody in the whole world seems to be talking about, or there's this great opening up in the world of, you can talk about anything you want that affects your life except religion. It's the one thing you are not allowed to talk about. And that's so sad that a minor, and I'm taking that to mean here someone under the age of 18, does not feel that he or she can speak to his or her parents about living the Catholic life, living the Christian life. So the first thing I would suggest is to try to have a sit-down conversation between that young person and the parents, to find out exactly, because sometimes we assume things about people. I mean, it is possible that a young person could assume that his parents would be against him being Catholic because of things they've said or done in the past, but maybe they would not hinder him or her. I don't know. So it's important to have that conversation. Then, if having said that, and the parents do hinder that individual, so much really depends on the age of that individual. It's kind of hard when you're only 7 years old to say, well, I'm going to go to a priest and get myself baptized anyways, as opposed to 17 years old, when you might be closer to moving on with your life in another situation, or moving out of the house or something along that lines. So again, so much really depends on timing. Is the person properly catechized? That's going to take time, and there's no reason why an individual, a young person, can't go through catechetical instruction to be ready to convert once he or she is able to do that. There have been a number of saints who have run off to religious life or the priesthood, or even embraced Christianity against the will of their parents, and they've suffered for it, but it is possible. Finding the priest who is going to be able to help a young person, it might be a little bit more difficult, because we also recognize that the parents have a fundamental right to bring their children up. Now, they don't have a right. No one, not even a parent, has the right to stand in the way of God for any reason whatsoever. But sometimes a more prudential decision might need to be taken for a short period of time. What about, there's no salvation outside the church? God is big, and any salvation that happens, even if someone is prevented from being baptized but desires baptism, experiences what we would call in the Catholic Church the baptism of desire, and as a result of that would be saved. What about the parents who are objecting? If they are they say, what about there's no salvation outside the church? Well, I don't know that it so much. I don't know. I'm really speculating here, because I have no idea what these parents would be holding. Would they be wanting their child to be to live a Protestant way of Christianity, or something anti-Christian altogether? So there are a number of different possibilities here, Carlos.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Thanks very much for the call. Father Paul Jerome Keller, our guest, is Ask a Priest. All the lines full. On we go. Isaac's in Charleston, South Carolina, listening on 7:30 a.m. Isaac, glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Father Keller.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. Father Paul, how you doing today?
Great, Isaac, and you?
Doing pretty good. So I've got a question. I'm a fairly recent convert to the faith, and funny enough, I grew up a Baptist preacher's kid, baptized Christian, and when I found the Catholic Church, pretty early on, I believed in the necessity of going to confession, and I had, made some mistakes in my life. And I began to have this desire to go to confession in August, and they weren't going to confirm me until Easter. And I was begging them, can I go to confession? And the priest's answer was, well, we're not going to give you any confession, any sacraments until we're pretty sure that you're going to become Catholic. And I ended up not being able to go to confession until the night before I was confirmed. And that just it bothered me then, and it bothers me now. Is there a reason why baptized Christians of any denomination that believe in the necessity of confession, or that believe in the ability of the priest to give, healing of the sick or an anointing, is there any reason that we couldn't confer those sacraments on any baptized Christian?
Yes. So the way I'm understanding you is you kind of have two parts to this question. The first part is has to do with your own experience, and quite frankly, that's a judgment call on the part of the priest. I personally, and I hope he's not listening and will get all upset and drive up here and shoot me. But South Carolina, that was supposed to be a joke. It didn't work. All right, so.
I think you're safe, Father.
Okay, thanks. But no, I mean, I think in that situation, if I have a man such as yourself who's really zealous to become Catholic, and you understand, if you are at the point of understanding how the sacraments work, and some basics about divine grace and living in union with God, and you are and you're validly baptized, but that's always another question as well. But if you're validly baptized and you are just really champing at the bit to get going and living the life before you're confirmed, received into the church and confirmed, I would hear your confession, because I don't want anyone to have to live in the burden of any past sins. Now, that said, we generally wait for people who are in the RCIA process to reach a certain point before we hear the confessions. So generally speaking, that's the case, but there are individual possibilities where a person could go to confession earlier. Okay, what about the other sacraments? Well, again, so much depends on, is this individual, such as yourself, ready to make that full commitment? Now, confession is one thing. Being anointed, or certainly receiving Holy Communion, all of those do require anointing. Well, that's a situation unto itself. But what other sacraments? The other sacraments are possible, not the reception of the Eucharist, until someone makes that full public profession. I hold and believe everything that the Catholic Church holds and believes and teaches. So you did that at some point. Going to confession is a matter of dealing with sin. It's not a matter of making a profession. So I would absolve someone of sin before, well before they make the public profession. Other sacraments, it would really depend, I think, Isaac. Does that help?
It does, yeah. I just, I had some family, my mother's still Protestant, but she believes in the efficacy of the Catholic Church and her sacraments. And she's, that's kind of been, she wonders why we gatekeep, in some cases, things like, confession and anointing of the sick. But that does answer my question, that a lot of it is a judgment call. I appreciate it.
Well, no, let me just say something more, since you brought up that situation of your mother. My question would be then, if she holds all of this to be true, what is preventing her from saying, okay, I'm going to say yes to all of this as well? Because that's the next logical step, right? If you believe what the church presents from Christ's lips, and from everything he taught the apostles that's been handed down to us in tradition, why not just go for it? Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying about your situation there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an issue of, if you believe these things, why not go ahead and go all the way and accept all of the truths that you don't understand and just accept the authority of the church?
Exactly. Precisely. Yes. Yeah. Good.
All right, Isaac. I guess we will leave it there with prayers for your mom and for you,
Yes.
and especially prayers of thanksgiving that you have found your way home to the Catholic Church. And thanks for the call. Boy, lots and lots of folks on the line. We'll take a very quick break. We'll come back and do more questions. Ask a Priest with Father Paul Jerome Keller right after this.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
He was a 10th century saint, priest, mystic, and doctor of the Church, honored as the first poet of Armenia.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
Gregory of Narek is revered by Armenians as a watchful angel in human form. His masterwork, the Book of Lamentations, was intended to be his last testament, an encyclopedia of prayer for all nations. He was named a Doctor of the Church in 2015.
To find out more, visit EWTN.com and click on Catholicism.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Father Paul Jerome Keller, our guest. It's Ask a Priest this hour. And, Father, I've said a couple times you're a Dominican priest. Not everybody knows what that is, but in the Catholic Church, we have various orders, and yours was founded by St. Dominic.
That is right. Although some people think it was founded by St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest Dominicans. But no, it was founded by St. Dominic in the 12th century, or he lived in the 12th century, 13th century, technically at the beginning. He founded the Order of Preachers. That's why we have OP after our name. It does not mean old priest. It means Order of Preachers.
Oh, I'm so glad you straightened that out. I always thought it meant old priest.
I thought, yeah. Thanks, Si.
Yeah. Well, then you wouldn't be able to ordain young men, though. You'd have to wait until they got old.
That's part of the problem. Yeah, exactly.
Bird is in Panama listening to EWTN on channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. We don't get a lot of calls from Panama, so Berta, welcome.
Hi, thank you. And I'm so delighted to hear about Father being a Dominican, Father Paul, because my birthday is on August 8th.
Wow.
St. Dominic, and I love St. Dominic.
Oh, beautiful, Berta.
Session all the time. Yes.
Great.
So,
happy birthday. You just had a birthday recently.
Yes. So I'm so thankful, and I thought, well, this is my chance that the Lord is lining it up. I'm confused. Well, not confused, but explain to me, please. I've been a lay Christian minister for almost 40 years, since I'm in my 20s. I'm in my 60s now. So explain to me gluten-free host.
Okay.
I'm sure is no longer but Jesus after the consecration, and I'm sure but I know that there is a formula for the regular host. I'm not sure.
So, Berta, is just so that I understand, for Father to answer, is part of your question why would someone still be sensitive to gluten if the bread has been changed into the body of Christ? Is that?
Well, and yeah, why does it have to even be put together for certain people or?
Okay.
Why do the church has now to accommodate this situation when it's really beyond after the consecration, and also the small amount or whatever it is that is in the quote unquote recipe?
Got it. Right. Okay, Berta, thank you. Father?
That's it. Yeah, there's a lot to this, Berta. So thank you, first of all, for your question. There is no such, we don't use, maybe there are such things as gluten-free. That is absolutely no gluten in a host, but such a host would not be valid matter to be used at the consecration at Mass. There has to be some gluten. So let's talk about what the host is made of on a regular basis. It's it's wheat and flour. There are no other ingredients in any of the hosts that are used at Catholic Mass, or there are no other ingredients that are valid other than wheat and water. So this has been the tradition of the Church since Christ instituted the Eucharist, that the bread is made of wheat. It's not made of rice. It's not made of rye. It's not made of any other grain but wheat. Which is a fairly common grain that is easily found or shipped to places in the world that might not grow it as easily. All right. Wheat has gluten. And for some reason, there seems to be a lot of people, there are a lot of people today who are experiencing gluten allergies. I'm not a physician or a medical person, so I really don't know what's involved. I don't understand what's happening in the breakdown of the systems of people who are intolerant to gluten. And a lot of people who are intolerant can have a little bit of gluten. Now, because of this, there has been in recent times the production of hosts or bread that is substantially reduced in the amount of gluten that it has, but it always has to have some gluten in order to be considered valid matter, or the kind of bread we would use. I think as little as sometimes as 1/100th of 1% is sometimes enough to cause problems for some people. That said, the hosts that we use are low gluten, not gluten-free. If a person is unable to receive communion and the host, even with a low gluten host, such a person may receive from the chalice, receive the precious blood of Jesus. And we know that Christ is present, body and blood, soul and divinity, by the principle of concomitance under both species. That is, Christ is fully present in the consecrated host. Christ is fully present in the smallest drop of the precious blood, the consecrated wine. What happens after consecration is that the accidents remain, but the substance changes. That's what transubstantiation is. It's the word that describes the only change in the world that can be referred to as transubstantiation. That is, that the entire substance is transmuted, changed into another substance. So the substance of bread and the substance of wine are changed into the substance of the body and blood of Jesus Christ. The accidents remain, however, right? So what you see in the host or what you see in the wine, in terms of its visible, its visibility, remains, right? It doesn't disappear into total spiritual something. So, for instance, with the wine, it still has the accidental quality of alcohol, which can have its effect on people as well. So the consecration doesn't change the accidents, those things that affect us, by which the substance is given to us. What would be another example of this? So the substance, when you eat an apple, you are eating, there's in a certain sense, you're letting the accidents of that apple affect you, nourish you, the taste and so forth. But you never really consume the substance of appleness. There is not appleness in your body. especially after it's been chewed and swallowed. But the accidents are there. That we're nourished by the accidents of the food we eat. The same thing with the Eucharist. So the accidents remain, but there's a new substance, and that's Christ. And that substance is joined to our souls.
Berta?
That's
right.
Kind of complicated, but I hope that helps a little bit.
Yes. No, you explained to me. I cannot explain to others, although I've been asked, because, as I said, I've been lay Christian minister, and because we had a situation that a person doesn't come all the time, but he asked our priest, Irving Sanchez, if they could receive from, of course, just the consecrated wine, because we have no such a thing as gluten-free hosts, like you explained.
Low gluten.
He has some
it would be low gluten.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, but we haven't had both species. We have not received both species in our parish since COVID. And then everybody, how come she received?
Oh, well, people.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Well,
And then we have to explain. And then when we explain, I said, but in that tiny host, they're going to be in danger, because then, I could never explain all that. I said, and I don't even understand it either. That's why I called.
But it is.
So that creates another set of questions, which should not be, because it's obviously seen, and it's not. We don't know when we're going to start back to the two species.
Right. The only thing though is, even if we don't understand it, some people do have a violent physical reaction to the gluten, and in charity we take care of them, or maybe even in justice, maybe not in charity.
Right.
But Bert, I'm going to try to get one more on, because we've got a little bit of time left. And so thank you very, very much for the call, and it's wonderful to hear from you. Kathleen is in Portland, Oregon, listening on Modern Day Radio. Kathleen, if you can be quick, we can get an answer for you from Father.
Okay, great. I was married by a Dominican priest here in Portland about 20 years ago. My husband is not Catholic. It wasn't baptized, so my marriage is not sacramental, but it's valid. So is my marriage lesser than. And I love the Dominicans here. They're soldiers for Christ here in Oregon. I love
beautiful.
Love them.
Oh, that's a wonderful testimony.
God.
So is her
great
marriage?
to hear from you, Kathleen.
Is her marriage a lesser marriage?
No, it's not a lesser marriage. What's missing is the sacramental grace that would unite Christ to the both of you. Since your husband is not baptized, he's an unbeliever, Christ is blessing you, we might say, Kathleen, because you are baptized. There's no way to stop. You can't stop the love of Christ in yourself, even because you do belong to him, even though your husband does not. And so this is a really interesting question. How does grace, what kind of grace is? It's not a sacramental grace, but there has to be something that God is doing in your life, in your marriage with your husband. And it would be interesting to explore that. We don't have time for that here right now, or that's kind of a big question anyways. But it's no less of a marriage, that's for sure. That said, there's more to be had. Would be the difference between, say, I don't know if this analogy works or not. A big steak dinner and a small hamburger. So it's
as far as the
meat,
grace that's available to them in their marriage, you mean? Is that what you mean?
Right. Yeah. It's not sacramental grace. It's a different. But there have to be actual graces that God is supplying, but it's not it's the marriage itself is not drawing in sanctifying grace.
Kathleen, thank you very much. Sorry to the callers we didn't get to. We did our best, but we appreciate it. Tomorrow's open forum, so if it's the kind of question you can ask in an open forum, then bring it back tomorrow. Father Paul Jerome Keller has been our guest. It's awful nice to have him back in the regular lineup here. Thank you, Father Keller, very much.
Great to be with you.
And that about wraps it up for us. I'll tell you one more time. If you want to come to the if you want to come to the conference, CatholicAnswersConference.com, and there's still a couple spots left for the November pilgrimage to Rome. If you're like, hey, I'd like to go with Catholic Answers to Rome, check it out, CatholicAnswersPilgrimage.com. That does it for us. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here, Catholic Answers Live.